Hello, welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thank you so much for joining us this week. My name is Davey Blackburn. I'm one of your hosts, and joining me for this very special episode is Aubrey Sampson.
Aubrey Sampson is in the house, and this is a special episode because we have, man, you got friends in high places. We got musician, worship leader, artist, creative.
I don't know about that as far as friends in high places, but there are some definitely, God has brought some really incredible people, guides, as we call it, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we always try to help you be eyes up for, is that God's going to bring guides into your life, into your story, to help you navigate your valley.
Yeah.
And this one's a unique one because we're having a conversation with Mack Brock.
Mack Brock, you might know his name.
Yep. Previously he was one of the founding members of Elevation Worship. He is actually the performing artist and one of the writers of the song Nothing is Wasted. So if you go to their album, Nothing is Wasted, he performs the live recording of it. And he's one of the writers of Nothing is Wasted, which is why we brought him on. I've never met Mack before this. We've never had a conversation. We just have lots of mutual friends. And so I reached out and I said, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with Mack about this, because I wonder how he would feel if he knew that this song that, he wrote, in an isolated vacuum on some level, away from this story.
Right.
He knew how much it has impacted us.
Do you talk about that when you have your conversation with him? So we don't necessarily want to tell that now, but I know this was a major part of your story, this song.
Huge. And so I actually share with him why Nothing is Wasted is the name of our ministry, why that song has to do with it. If you've read the book already, you'll encounter that in chapter 2. And so, it's we did there's a really cool thing that depending on when this is released, I think this is going to be released after the book launch event, but we did a really cool book launch at the book launch event, a really cool thing wrapped up with the reading of that and the song and all this kind of stuff. So
awesome.
Yeah, it was such a profound, and it was cool to have a conversation with him to go, hey, the songwriter, like God's putting some things on your heart. You have no idea how it is impacting people.
For real.
But music is one of those things that really God uses when we don't have the words. You're now putting words into it. Let me say it this way. So Amanda's dad, one of the things he talks about is when we lost Amanda, he says, I lost my song. Like he's like, and he was a worship pastor for years and years and years, right? Now he's a senior pastor, but it's like, I lost my song. I couldn't sing anymore. And that's what songwriters and musicians, especially worship leaders who songwrite, that's what they give to us, the body.
That's right.
Because when we lose our song, they give us words to sing. And so, that's really what we wrap this whole conversation around. And I tell Mack why it was so significant, and just to kind of get his reaction. And it's really cool.
Cannot wait to hear that. I cannot wait for our community to hear that as well, Davey. This is going to be another very, very special episode. So I say we go ahead and take a listen. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, Mack, it's such an honor to have you on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Davey.
Man, I know there's a lot of people who are going to be familiar with you, with what you do, with a lot of your work, but just for the sake of, just for everybody, let's kind of catch everybody up to the same page. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I am a worship leader, songwriter from Charlotte, North Carolina. Actually, today I'm celebrating 18 years married with my wife, Meredith.
Come on.
Yeah, it's a pretty big day. And we've got 3 kids. Harvey is about to turn 13, so we're entering a whole new phase. Prayers up on that. Then we have a daughter, Cyrus, who's 9, and a son, Zamir, who's 4. So we're in the thick of it.
Yeah, and you got it spread out like us. We're 10, 9, and 4 too, and it's like you have one in one season where they're and then one's just coming out of like potty training. You're going, okay.
I know you think you're done with one area, you think you're done with one season of childhood, and then you restart, and it's just all back into diapers and everything all over again.
Oh my gosh, man. I know. Well, that's exciting. What an exciting season for you guys. I know we'll talk a little bit about some of that too here in a little bit. But Mack, I told you a little bit of this off air. I wanted to bring you on in this series that we're doing leading up to the book Nothing Is Wasted release, because you're one of the songwriters on, and you're actually the performing artist on the particular song that Elevation Worship came out with years ago called Nothing Is Wasted. Yeah. And this was such a profound song for me because, as you know, my wife was killed in a home invasion in 2015. And there was a 24-hour period between November 10th and November 11th that we were in the hospital and we were waiting for test results to come back. Yeah. And I was sitting there with her sister. We were on either side of the hospital bed from each other. Just, you know, my late wife was being basically kept alive by machines, and we were wondering if she was going to pull through or not. And we knew that if she could listen to anything, if she could hear anything right now, that she'd want to listen to Elevation Worship. She used to listen to Elevation Worship all the time while she was running. And so I put on Pandora radio station, which, you know, Pandora, I don't even know if anybody listens to Pandora anymore, but back then it was like kind of the thing, but it's randomized. And so you don't get to choose what song comes up, but I put it on Elevation Worship, Pandora radio station. And the first song that comes up was the song Nothing Is Wasted.
Man.
And it was like this moment, Mack, where her sister and I looked at each other and there were no words. We just knew that God had just stepped into that moment. And he was telling us, hey, this is not going to turn out the way that you want it to turn out. Wow. But I promise you, I'm not going to waste this.
Yeah.
And that became a mantra for us as a family through that season, that we held on to this hope and this idea that nothing is wasted. And part of it called back to what Amanda did for a hobby that she was turning into a business where she would restore furniture. And so the first time she asked me to pick up a dresser off the side of the road, you know, I'm feeling like American Pickers or something. And I bring it home to her, something that someone had thrown out. I bring it home to her and I look at her, I said, what are you going to do with this? This is trash. This is garbage.
Right.
And she said, Davey, trust me, give me a little time and I'm going to turn this into something beautiful.
Yeah.
And every time she did. And so the week after she passed away, the Lord brought that to my mind. And I felt like he said, Davey, trust me, give me a little time. I'm going to turn this into something beautiful. Yeah. And so that phrase, nothing is wasted, is something we just clung to. And we performed that song at her funeral, and it became a mantra for our church that I was pastoring at the time, for our family. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, is to make that connection and say thank you, because you have no idea when you're writing music, you have no idea when you're crafting these things, how it's going to impact people in the darkest moments of their lives. Yeah, that's and how so it's going to lift them out of that, you know?
Yeah, you write these songs and, you know, you write a lot of them, right? So many, and then you like stick them out into the world, and it never gets old hearing how a song might touch somebody or, you know, minister to somebody in a good season and a dark season, and, you know, the mountain or the valley. And it's always, man, it's humbling and it's encouraging to hear. So thank you for sharing that. That means like so much to me.
Well, I'm going to shut up now and ask you a bunch of questions, because I want to hear from you on this process, because you're right. You just said it. You know, you write these songs. I'd love to hear from you as a songwriter, first of all. What is that process like? Because some people, you know, I mean, if they're not in it, they're not immersed in it, but what is it like, and how does it feel to know what it's doing for people as you're coming up with this stuff? Talk about some of those experiences, like these big moments where God rushes in and shows up, you know, and the Holy Spirit leads these processes.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting, songwriting is such a funny thing to talk about, because it is so mysterious and it's such a weird, you know, sometimes it's very easy. Sometimes it's a slog that you got to fight and, you know, claw at to finish. And sometimes it just like flows supernaturally, like very quickly. So it's such a different, you know, it's hard to talk about sometimes, because I don't know how to quantify like, oh, here's the process. Here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, you know? But I think in general, one of the things, just even going back to that song in particular, is I think it's important when I'm writing a song to at least have like a theme or an idea that we want to start with, especially with worship music, because worship can be so expansive and so broad that sometimes you can find yourself just like grasping for phrases or words that are just common in worship music that don't even fit all together in like a theme, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so it's important to even like have that focus of like, here is what we're talking about. And let's make sure like every line, every lyric goes into the theme of what this song is essentially about. And so even with like Nothing Is Wasted, it's funny, you know, I've always grown up knowing that the Lord works by taking horrible situations and rising them up out of the ashes into a beautiful thing. That's, you know, growing up, I'm a pastor's kid. So I always was told that, always heard the stories of that. God's grace, how he takes dead things, brings them back to life. But even like the concept of nothing is wasted, like that phrase, it was almost like a light bulb. Like when we were writing that song, that was the first time, even for me, that it clicked of like, okay, not only does the Lord take bad things and make them good, but just everything in general that happens in your life, he is not going to waste a single day, a single moment, a single situation. He will use everything to eventually like tell the story of your life and tell the story of his glory. And so even for me, you know, it's kind of like a funny thing when you're in a songwrite and you're sitting there and you're throwing out ideas for you to have like an epiphany of like, oh, wow. Like I've never even thought about it, about it like that. And I think even for one of the things that I always loved about that song too, is the chorus says, you are loving and you are wise. Yeah. And I had never heard a song have those two things juxtaposition together. Like, you know, you love me so much, but you're also so wise, and I can trust like your wisdom. I can trust that you're not seeing like the small picture, but you're seeing the big picture. And so, yeah, ultimately I feel like that song is saying like, I trust you. And so whether you're in like the worst situation of your life, you can say, even if you don't feel it in the moment, like when you're in that situation, you're not thinking like, I wonder how God is going to make this into a good thing. Like you're just sitting in the dark. You're sitting in the worst imaginable pain. And so ultimately, if you can just get to a place where you're saying like, I can't see the good, like I can't see how this is going to be good. I can't see how you're going to make this into a good situation, but I am going to choose to trust that eventually I will see it, or trust that eventually like I will be able to see what you were doing with this thing that I'm going through.
It's so good. That just the phrase "nothing is wasted" has become such a people stop us all the time. Like we have these sweatshirts. We were at art conference a couple of weeks ago with our team, and we got these sweatshirts that say "nothing is wasted," and they stop us and they're like, "That is so powerful." You know, it's just it's all encompassing. It's a conversation starter. It piques curiosity from people, especially like people outside the faith. You know, they're like, "Wait, what does that mean?" You know,
what does that even mean?
But then it becomes this like resonance among people who are believers. We're like, I never thought about that, but you're right. That's so true.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a beautiful thing. Like maybe even talk to me a little bit about like how that emerged. Do you recall like just that phrase in its poignancy and potency? Boom. How did this emerge as like, this is what we're going to center this entire and anchor this entire song around?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't remember the specifics of where even that phrase came from, but I remember, it's so funny. I went back and listened to that song today, knowing that I was doing this podcast. I haven't gone back and heard that song. And I mean, it's been many years.
Well, it was released in 2011 or something, you know, I mean, it's been a long time. And you've written hundreds of songs since then.
You just keep moving. And I go through like nostalgic phases, or I'll go back and listen to old albums. It's just been a while. But I remember, you know, we were I remember writing the verse first, and we were living in that, you see my every need, my poverty, you are enough for me, Jesus. I think that's the lyric. And then we landed on that chorus of the you're loving, you're wise. There's nothing in my life that you cannot revive. And I remember we just had that chorus for a long time. And so when you're writing, it's a lot of, sometimes things come quickly, but sometimes you're just sitting, replaying the same thing for 30 minutes, trying to see where does this lead? What comes after this? And so I don't even remember the specifics about how it happened, but I do remember us just having that chorus, sitting in that chorus. There's nothing in my life you cannot revive. There's nothing in my life you cannot revive. Like that was such a powerful thing, a powerful idea to wrap our heads around, of like, when you're in the lowest point, like you can still lift us up there. You can still pull us out of that. And I think eventually, obviously someone, I don't remember who or when or how, like threw out that idea of like, the nothing is wasted. You work all things for good, and kind of went from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's such a cool thing to, like the songwriting process and the collaboration between all of it. And, it's just like, so many people, our worship team, after Amanda's death, we went on a songwriting retreat, and I was just trying to flesh out some of the stuff that God was doing in my heart. And as we're all grieving together, to write about, put pen to paper. And just that experience in and of itself was so cathartic to be able to begin to label different emotions that we were feeling, different things that we were experiencing, begin to put words to it, but also begin to tether to those words. Like, here's the truth of God's word. Here's what we can anchor our hearts and our souls to. And it's like, there was nothing that I don't know if there's anything that's really compared, because, I'm a preacher at heart, so I don't usually do collaborative sermon writing. I usually don't do, but there's something that was so beautiful about like all of this stuff getting thrown on the wall and, just kind of all converging together.
And that's one of the things that I love about songwriting in particular. I grew up playing in bands, writing just songs by myself all the time. And it wasn't until I started writing worship music that I started co-writing with other people, and it became more of a collaborative process. And now that's the only way that I write. I'll write by myself a lot, but it's always with the idea of like, I'm going to share this with somebody else, and together we're going to finish this. Because for me, I love the snowball effect of ideas with other people. And songwriting can be a super vulnerable thing. It's super vulnerable to throw out an idea and the people you're writing with kind of staring at you, trying to think of the best way to say that idea sucks.
That was not a good idea.
Yeah. And that sucks to hear. But I think like for me, once you get past that idea, and once you realize even your lame ideas could potentially lead to a breakthrough and lead to something else that is going to be the song or the lyric or the whatever, that's such a freeing thing. Even with Nothing Is Wasted, like I have no idea how many bridges maybe we went through before we landed on the Nothing Is Wasted idea. And so I don't know, who knows how many crummy ideas I threw out that led to, something special happening. And that's just like a cool, I don't know, it's a cool process to be a part of. And it's a cool thing to see it start to flow and start to come together. And then somebody has that like phrase or that turn or that thing that you like grab hold of and like, oh yeah, that's the anchor of the song. And that's what, even if we've gotten most of the song written already, that everything is tied together now in like a nice little package. That's really cool.
Mack, you've spent so much of your time. I mean, you grew up in church, so you're a pastor's kid. You've spent so much of your career as a worship leader, not just a songwriter, but a worship leader. And there's something unique about that and distinct from just songwriting or, being a singer-songwriter. I mean, leading corporate worship and leading people into the presence of God. And it's such an imperative part of not only our journey as believers, but especially when we find ourselves in really real spaces where we're just in despair or down. We have no words to be able to communicate. It's almost like when scripture says the Holy Spirit communicates with groans or utterances that we don't. We can't, we don't have those. And so he does that for us. But why do you think, from your perspective, I'm just curious, why is worship such an imperative part of our journey? So much so that it caused you to say, this is what I want to spend my life doing, is helping people to connect with God through worship. Well, friends, the wait is finally over. The Nothing is Wasted book is out and available now wherever you buy books. This story is not just Amanda and my story, but it's a part of a bigger story, a story that I promise you, as you read it, it will remind you that in your story, nothing is wasted. Listen, pain is real, life is hard, but my hope is that as you read this story, you'll be able to see the ways in which God is showing up for you, and he's walking you through, sometimes carrying through the valley, no matter what you face, and that he always is with you. I'm so grateful for you being a part of this Nothing is Wasted community and for you being a part of my healing journey. And I can't wait for you to get a copy of Nothing is Wasted, the book. You can go to nothingiswastedbook.com to order your copy now. You can buy it anywhere books are on sale. And you can also pick up an audiobook if you can stand to hear me reading the book to you. I'm so grateful for you. And I'm excited to hear how this book is impacting you in your own personal journey. Nothingiswastedbook.com. Pick it up today and let us know how it's impacting you.
Yeah. I mean, it is such a, I think you said it in a lot of ways of, it gives us language to say that maybe we don't know how to say. And it gives us, words to express like praise and admiration to Jesus and giving him like all the worth that he is deserving of. Like it gives us language for that. I mean, when we read the Bible and we're in the Word, and the Bible is always revealing new stuff to us because it's living and it's breathing and it's, you're reading it and you're receiving, oh, shoot, this is how this like is affecting my life right now. And this is changing my life right now, reading these words. I think in a lot of ways, like worship is another, like an outward expression of that, of like, okay, I didn't even know that this was what I wanted to say to Jesus right now until like it came up and I could say it. And I think the other thing about worship that I love so much is that it is like, it can become prayers for us too, and we can pray the things and sing the things out loud that we want in our lives or that we want for our hearts. And I talk about this a lot, but when you look at a song like It Is Well With My Soul, that was written out of tragedy. That's a song that for the most part, there have been so many times that I've sang that song and my heart didn't feel like it wanted to say it is well.
Yeah.
My heart didn't feel like it is well. My heart felt this sucks. I hate being here right now. I hate I hate whatever situation I'm in right now, but I am going to choose to sing It Is Well With My Soul. And maybe my heart will start to warm up to that idea. Maybe my heart will start to soften and my heart will start to be tender to what the Lord is doing. And it just, I don't know, there's special things, there's special moments in that. And the last thing I'll say to that is I really think that there is something profoundly special when you're in a congregation of God's people saying the same things about who God is or celebrating the same victories, they're personal victories, but we all have stories that we can sing out loud together, or we all have prayers that we can bring out loud together. And I just think that it's one of the reasons that I have loved leading worship for so many years and I don't get tired of it, is because when you're in a room just full of people all singing together, saying the same things together, it's just like a powerful force. It's a powerful thing to witness.
Wow. Yeah, it's an amazing thing to be a part of too. Like there's just such a beautiful, as a preacher, there's such a beautiful marrying of the word and worship. And it's almost like I'll go in and speak at places now where I'm like, oh crap. It's like I was just at a business breakfast speaking last week, and I'm like, can we get some like worship up here
now?
First
I gotta like dive into
warm the room a little bit or something.
Hey, I've led worship at events like that, and I'm like, oh gosh, all right. It's like pulling teeth. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill, trying to set the atmosphere of the tone. But
I know, but it is a beautiful thing to really see when it's married well, to see how people's hearts begin to open up and the Holy Spirit of God just rushes in and ministers to people in ways that even like whether it's the lyrics of the song or the sermon, like we didn't even say those things overtly, but the Holy Spirit really ministered to them right where they needed to be because of the atmosphere that creates.
Yeah. And music is such a gift. Like music, I'm somebody that gets moved by music so easily and quickly, and it always like it catches me off guard. It doesn't make sense to me like why a song might move me or touch me. Most of the time it's not a worship song. It's just like that's a very real lyric or a vulnerable lyric or a melody that just like hits me. And that's like such a cool gift that the Lord gave us, music that touches our hearts and that like kind of gives us goosebumps and gives us chills and makes us feel things, even if there's no lyrics being said. Just the way that we're created, it's like human beings, we can be like moved by something like music. So when you pair, I don't see it as like emotional manipulation at all. I see it as like using all the gifts that the Lord has given us to harness heart change and to harness like, man, like I've listened to songs that I'm like, that open my eyes in an instant to an idea that I've never been aware of, that might not be a worship song, but it's just like a lyric or something. I'm like, holy cow, I'm going to see the world differently now from here on out.
Right.
Right. And that's such a cool thing. And especially when you can pair that up with songs of like literally about Jesus and songs about like praising Jesus and worshiping him or receiving truth from him or whatever it might be. It's like an unstoppable force. It's like so unique and special.
Man, I'd lament not to talk, no pun intended, but not to ask you about this and your thoughts on this. But a lot of things, obviously you said it off air. We lead a ministry that's very heavy, and we talk a lot about grief and lament and the really difficult times of life, and one of the things that we have remarked as we've observed is that there seems to be a lack of, or not as much songwriting around the idea of lament, of just like, and yet there's so much scripture that really centers around this idea of like inviting people into lament, to bringing those really difficult, deep existential wrestlings and questions to God, and not having necessarily an answer or a pretty bow to put on the end of it. I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, where is that the place for that in corporate worship? Have you wrestled with that at all? Like, what is, because I do think there is a whole segment of people who are going like, I in a particular season of life, I can go into church or a corporate worship setting and I'm not there yet. Yeah. If it's just this like victorious kind of, you know what I mean? And there's places for that too, right? Those bring us to this place of trusting the promises of God despite our feelings. But sometimes there can be a disconnect there. I'm just curious your thoughts as you've waded in those waters a ton.
Are you feeling stuck in your tragedy, trauma, or major life transition? I know I have. The truth is, without a clear path and a careful plan, the valleys we face will only seem to grow darker, more depressing, and more difficult to navigate. I know early on in my journey after losing my son that I needed a guide to help me navigate the aftermath. That is why at Nothing is Wasted, we offer one-on-one certified coaches who are ready to help walk with you through your pain and find a path towards purpose. You can find a coach who understands your unique story through their own pain to purpose journey, and who is ready to help you create a plan to move through your difficulties. You can't repurpose what you don't process, and you can't process what you don't own, and you can't own what you don't name, and you can't name what you can't see. Let our certified coaches help you see what you can't, so you can walk from pain to purpose.
Learn more by going to nothingiswasted.com/coaching and find a guide for the dark. That's nothingiswasted.com/coaching to find someone who can help you today. Together, you and your Nothing is Wasted certified coach can help you find your way from pain to purpose.
Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody recently about this, and it is true. There aren't a ton of songs that kind of sit in the sorrow. And, you know, David wrote like that, like a ton, you know, and he really sat in those like vulnerable, I am unhappy right now and I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And then it just ends, you know, that passage
like,
ends.
Is that it?
Yeah, right. And it is true. There aren't a ton of songs like that. I don't totally have an answer for why, or, you know, what that says about us. I could speak for myself that I am an idealist and optimistic person at heart. And I have so many things that I wrestle with and struggle with. And it's not all rainbows and sunshine for me by any means. You know, right. A lot of like things that'll like trigger stress or anxiety or whatever it might be. And I'll sit in those and I'll process it, and I'll pray and ask the Lord, like, what do why am I feeling this way? What's going on here? But I think I'm naturally dispositioned to try to find the positive, you know? And so a lot of my songs, you know, beyond Nothing is Wasted, but just like current songs or whatever, a lot of my songs do wrestle with being in the wilderness, being in the valley. But almost always I will tend to turn that into the truth of like, but what does that mean? Like with being victorious in Jesus and being, you know, alive in Jesus. And I think that that's just a little bit of the way that I'm wired. You know, even my wife gives me a hard time and gets annoyed at me sometimes because she'll be processing something with me and I'm always quick with like well, let's look at it from this angle and it could be positive. You know, like she's always like, I don't want to hear that right now. I don't want you to be the devil's advocate right now. Just kind of let's just wallow in what I'm dealing with. And so I think for me, it's a little bit of just kind of naturally how I'm wired. But I do think that there is probably like a need for that in a healthy way to allow people to sit in that. Because so many of God's people in scripture, they didn't have a problem like sitting in that, you know, and then eventually like leading into truth or leading into, you know, what the Lord had in store big picture wise, but there wasn't a lot of issue of like being like completely vulnerable. This is where I'm at. This sucks. You know, whatever it might be.
Right. Well, I'm like you, man. I'm a very optimistic, idyllic kind of person. And I think that's why the song Nothing is Wasted really struck me. And I gravitated to that in that season, because in the midst of everything around me falling apart and my whole world getting turned upside down and going, there is no way there is a way through this.
Right.
Being able to hold on to the hope of resurrection, being able to hold on to the hope of God's not going to waste this, was something that my entire soul needed to grab onto. And even though,
Can I ask you a question
I don't believe it or
about
see
that?
it necessarily, but yeah, go ahead.
Because I'm curious, because I think maybe I'm off on this, but I feel like the world, you know, when you don't have Jesus and you don't have that hope, they would probably see your situation and maybe even like your response to your situation as unnatural, or like maybe even like some would say like unhealthy. Like you should be devastated and your life should be over and whatever it might be. And I feel like I see a lot where if someone deals with something in a, you know, eventually like positive way and like, you know, eventually feels victorious or feels like I can look back at this and say nothing is wasted and I can kind of move on with my life. They almost see that as like something must be wrong or something like, so, you know, you're not dealing with something. Did you ever wrestle with that or come across that?
Oh goodness. Yeah, absolutely. You can go read like Reddit forums and all kinds of stuff if you want to, and find a lot of people that said that, even, you know, about, I mean, there were shortly afterwards, and you know, our friends at New Spring, and you know, they sent a team on the ground immediately to really shelter me from the media firestorm that was. And we knew that Amanda's heart was that her heart was that Jesus would be put on display in her life. Yeah. And so I knew that her heart would be, no matter what, while the media would want to focus on the crime and the situation around it, that Jesus needed to be put on display. And I knew that I did not want anything to shroud the purity of who she was in terms of her faithfulness and longstanding endurance and her faith and her love for the Lord. And so while I'm like talking with Good Morning America about,
I didn't even think about that aspect of the media and like obsession with, you know, crime.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
so you have everything from like the large scale picture of that all the way to, yes, people even maybe somewhat connected 2 arms lengths away going like, how is he responding this way? How is this? And I can't describe it other than what scripture says, that there's a peace that passes all understanding. Guarding my heart and mind. Now, did I experience the depths of depression and darkness and despair? Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But I can see how now, looking back on it, how my response looked unnatural because it was unnatural.
Right.
It was supernatural. And I think that's where, like, I'm even, Mac, as I was asking you that question earlier, I was having kind of an epiphany going, well, yeah, we do have a whole lot of stuff in the Old Testament about that's lament and David's Psalms, where they get to the cliff where they go, it's like and that's it. Like what you just said, it's like, you know, I see no end in sight, and that's it. And Hebrews even speaks to that and says there are people that still hoped for, but never saw the fruition of what they hoped for. And it was credited to them as faith. But we, on this side of things, we have this incident that changes the way we can view everything. It provides a different filter for how we can view everything that goes on in our life. And that incident is a very real historical incident that happened where Jesus was raised from the dead.
Yes.
And that's where like that lyric goes, you know, you are loving, you are wise. There's nothing in my life that you cannot revive. This is a kind of funny anecdote, but in 2011, when you guys came out with that song, that's when we were leaving New Spring to plant a church. And I'm just like digging into that song. And there was another one you released too, that on an EP. I can't remember which one it was, but those 2 songs I was just like digging into because they were feeding my spirit as we're stepping out to do this really crazy thing that I thought, man, our time at New Spring's done. Now we're starting this new thing. And I said, I would sing, I'm notorious for this, Mac. I would sing, there's nothing in my life you cannot revise. I would like, because I just wasn't really listening to the lyrics. I just like was picking up on it.
The same
and I was
way,
just singing it. And so I'm singing it, and my late wife goes, Davey, the lyric is revive, not revise. But it stopped me too in that moment where I'm going, wait a minute, that's actually a major theological shift. Like God doesn't just revise our stories. It's not like he's coming in as the editor going like, oh, we got to fix this, or we got to shift this, or God comes in and revives our story, like brings it back to life from the dead.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, because he's not just coming, he's not like a crisis manager that's coming in to like say, how can we correct the ship and how can we, you know, make this into a good thing? Like he's like, nope, like let's take it all down and let's create like a new, completely new thing and a new, you know, breathe life into this.
Yeah. So back to your original question there, like absolutely, I felt that scrutiny. I felt that criticism. I felt that. And yet I understand our response as believers is not natural. Yeah. We have something that in the supernatural that governs how we see everything.
Right. And I think it gets lost maybe, especially in today's culture, like we're very hyper analytical, we're hyper cynical, and we're just trying to like pick apart everything. And so sometimes we chalk up a lot of real feelings that we have in our heart as like, well, that's just Christianese, or that's just like Christian cult. That's just like church culture, especially if you grew up in the church and you're, you know, and I understand really digging in stuff and really like wrestling with heartache and not just kind of softballs to every situation as like, well, nothing is wasted. Even that like could become like that's just a Christian phrase, I get the wrestling with that. I totally understand that. But I fight so hard against cynicism and so hard. That's one of the things that me and my wife talk about a ton is I think cynicism is like so easily creeps into our spirit and our heart, and then it shifts. So it has like huge effects on our lives. And so we really are like very adamant and very proactive about like, I don't want to be cynical. I want to be soft hearted. I don't want to be naive. I don't want to be just kind of like, whatever, everything's good no matter what. Like I want to be real. I want to be authentic. I want to wrestle. I want to fight, but I don't want to just be cynical all the time. And I think that's just like very easy in our culture. And I don't know even where I'm going with this, but I feel like sometimes it's easy to write off the way that we're feeling or the true even redemption in our life as like Christian talk or just like that's shallow or that's like surface level stuff. When in reality, a lot of that stuff like really is real. Like it really is peace that transcends understanding. It's like a rest over our spirit of like, I can rest in the presence of Jesus. And that's not just a blanket statement. That's like a real thing. And I know you had, I don't know if it's come out yet. You had Lisa Turkers on the podcast, right?
We've had her a couple times. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. She's a close friend of ours and my wife works with her, and she's one of my favorite people that can communicate while in the middle of that, that darkness. Like she's so good at communicating, not just on the other side, not just saying like, all right, here was my battle 5 years ago and let me tell you how I got through it. She's like, oh no, here's the battle that I'm in currently right now as I'm writing this. And I don't know how I'm going to get out of it. I don't know what's on the other side of it, but this is the truth that I'm choosing to believe. And this is the truth that I'm planting my feet on. And I think that is like just so weird if you're looking at it from the outside and you don't have, faith in Jesus, or you don't have, you haven't experienced that in your own life. It is unnatural to kind of witness from the outside.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And then it gets layered with complexity when you have somewhat of whether it's a, smaller public ministry or large public ministry, now you've just experienced something in the eyes of everybody. They're watching how you react, and they're watching the stuff that he or she was saying before this. Do they still say that? Do they still believe that? You're wrestling with it in your own spirit. You're going like, do I really believe what I've been preaching or what I've been saying? And so now it's just extremely complex. And yet I look at it and I go, that's part of how I think God leads his people too, is that, those like Elisa Turkers or like yourself or like, those who already have had that kind of platform and they're leading people. Of course, we're not going to be impervious to tragedy. Of course, we're not going to be You look at the prophets in the Old Testament, and God allowed so much hardship to befall all of them and in some ways, like, then he leveraged it as an illustration, like you look at Hosea, it's like, hey, listen, here's what I'm calling you to. Nobody wanted the calling that Hosea has to marry a prostitute. And then when she's unfaithful again, go back and take her. But he's like, no, this is what I'm calling you to. And this is going to be really difficult. And you're going to live this out publicly, but it's going to be for the sake of the people of Israel. So they see how much I love them. Gosh. And you're like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
You know? So, but then, you take what you're saying and you've got the world looking at all of that going, this is really peculiar. There's something fishy here. And you're like, because it's just not natural.
Yeah. There would be so many TikToks just like making fun of him. And there'd be so many TikToks now of just like breaking down why he's an idiot. And wow.
Yeah. I got a question for you. We had to wrestle through it. I just said like, in 2011 when Nothing's Wasted came out, we were in the midst of leaving New Spring, planting a church. You've had to wrestle with that same big faith step. I mean, you were one of the founding members of Elevation Worship, and then you decide to step out. That's a difficult faith step. I mean, that
Yeah.
I have empathy for that. We've taken 2 major faith steps in our journey from this, going like, God, what in the world? How is this going to, but we know you're calling us to this. Talk to me about how you and your wife, like, what has that done for you guys? What has that done for your own, just your faith in the Lord as you've seen him provide and lay that road out for you?
Hi, friend. I wanted to share with you one of my favorite resources from Nothing is Wasted. It's the Pain to Purpose 42-day devotional. This devotional is a beautiful 42-day journey through life's valleys with biblically based encouragement to help you or someone you love navigate the difficulties of life. Each week, you'll learn from the journey of a major character in Scripture and reflect on how that impacts your own story and whatever you are facing. From Job to David, from Ruth to Jesus himself, you'll see how God has taken the most dire of circumstances and brought healing and redemption from the ashes. This devotional makes a great gift for the person who's walking through a recent loss or trauma, or who carries the wounds from pain in their past. It's something that you can keep on hand to give to someone who is experiencing any kind of pain point, and is a great addition to your daily time with the Lord. For just $25, you can get one for yourself or gift it to a friend. For our Nothing is Wasted podcast listeners, we want to offer you 20% off your entire order with the coupon code PODCAST in all caps. Grab a copy today of the Pain to Purpose 42-day devotional at nothingiswasted.com/devo. Be encouraged by it yourself, or encourage someone else in their journey through life's valleys.
Yeah, I think, like I said, we celebrated 18 years of marriage today. And so today you're kind of like as a nostalgic day of looking back and seeing all that the Lord has done in our lives. And it is crazy to think there have been very big faith steps that we can like pinpoint back to our lives. And me and my wife are both we're very, very big planners. We're type A. We like to have goals. We like to know what's coming. We like to have like, all right, here's our plan for the next couple of years, the next 5 years, whatever it might be. But when I look at our life and where we're at now, everything that has led up to our life now hasn't been a part of a plan. And it hasn't been a part of like, here was the goal, and here's how we're going to get there. And that is counter to just how I'm wired. And so it's really, it's special to look back and to see, wow, I had no idea when we got married, we had zero plans to move to Charlotte to be part of this like new church and to try to help start this worship ministry. That wasn't on our radar at all. Then we did that. And we said yes to that like step of faith that we felt like the Lord called us to. So we said yes, and we stepped into that, and we did that for so many years. Then out of the blue, it's like, all right, your assignment's done. Now you're going to step out and do something else. And we're like, well, we've actually worked really hard for this. We've poured our life into this. We feel good about where we're at. We don't really feel like we need to leave. But the Lord's like, nope, let me, trust me, step out. Yeah. And so we say, okay, we're going to open our hands. We're going to not cling so tight to the things that we think we want or the things that we love. We're going to open our hands and be obedient to that. And then you see, years later, wow, look at where we're at now, and it is just those, there are, I think in people's lives, there are going to be big moments of faith that are like, when you look back, you're like, wow, here's 2 or 3 big shifts in our life that changed the course of changed the direction of our life. But I think also, at least for us, so much of that is built into like little steps of faith and little yeses and little things of saying like, yes, okay, I'm going to trust you in this process. And just a quick example of that is like, even for our son, Zamir, we just finalized his adoption back in February. And
congratulations. That's amazing.
We were foster parents. So he's been a part of our family for years. But even becoming foster parents, that was so scary to me. That was like a big faith yes to me that I couldn't make. I was like not there. And I was like not, I was not in the right state in my heart to be like, yes, I can be a foster dad. I can handle this. I was like, no, that's too scary for me. But my wife, it was like very big on her heart. And so I said, okay, yes, I will take the class that introduces like all the ideas of fostering. I'll say yes to that.
I'll get educated on this.
Yeah, I will read these books. I will meet with the agency. Okay, yes, it was all these like little yeses that eventually just changed my own heart and silenced all the fears that I had and all the, notions that I thought I knew about foster care that were wrong. It like silenced all that stuff in my heart to where eventually I could say the big yes of like, okay, yes, let's open up our home, to whoever might call and be in need. And that led to my son, and so that is like such a gift. And so I say all that to say there are going to be moments that are like big faith yeses, big steps of obedience that are scary and feel completely life-changing and but for the most part, so much of our life is just those daily small yeses of faith and small steps forward to say like, okay, I don't know if I'm ready for this big thing, but I will say yes to this like little thing and just walk with you step by step and see where it leads.
Man, so good. I mean, that's all those steps for you, those are huge steps. I mean, we have a lot of people who listen to this podcast, they watch it, they're in the midst of fostering, adoption.
Yeah.
And that's, you're absorbing, it's a beautiful picture of the adoption that God does for us and bringing us into his family, right? But you're absorbing more often than not someone's traumatic past, because the reason they're in the foster system is because there's a broken or dysfunctional family, and you're bringing them into that. That has had to have been really difficult for you guys. What have you guys observed in helping him, solidifying that with your family?
Yeah, it's been a learning curve for us. I've learned so much just about trauma and about people's responses to trauma and how it affects us. Yeah. I mean, honestly, before I even like learned about foster care, it was like did research or, took the classes and all that stuff. I was still of the mindset of like, all right, if you don't have memories before you're like 3, so anything that happens to you before then, like it's whatever, like you're not going to remember it. It's all. What I've learned since then is how wrong that is. But honestly, like even ever, from like in utero to like 6 months are some of the most formative times in a person's life, because it's not working off memory, it's working off like neurological wirings of like how you are being wired as a person. And so that's a crazy thing to deal with and to wrestle with and to figure out, all right, these are things that it's almost like it's not a mental battle that I can win. It's like, this is how I'm wired. How can I rewire myself, or how can I help rewire the way that my kids respond? This goes for my biological kids, and my adoptive son. And it's just a crazy thing to think like we all have traumas that we're carrying, that some are in our memories that we know of, and a lot of them are just things that we're not even aware of. And those are the hard things to process. Those are the harder things, because it's so under the surface. So I have learned a lot about that. I'm still learning a lot about it. I still don't totally know how it works or what works. Me and my wife are always, with all of our kids, but especially with our youngest, partially because he's a 4-year-old and they're chaotic all the time. We're constantly trying to figure out like, all right, what's the strategy today? What's the strategy for this season of his life to help him become the little boy, the man that he's supposed to be, and how can we steward him well and serve him well? And it's changing all the time, and we're figuring it out.
Wow. Well, it is. It's an amazing, difficult journey. It's an amazing journey. It's an unbelievable calling. I'm grateful that you and your wife have taken that on. I was of the same mindset. My 9-year-old now, he's 15 months old when his mom passed away. And I thought I was the same thing. I was like, man, I'm grateful that he's not going to I thought it was, if this was going to happen, I literally said this out loud at one point, if this is going to happen, this is probably the perfect timing in his life for it to happen, because she was able to, like, you know, wean him off of nursing. She had the formidable first year, 15 months of his life where she was able to pour into him, and he won't remember. So now it's not like he's 10 years old and he's just got this like fractured separation.
Like a traumatic memory. Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I thought. And now I'm like, I couldn't be more wrong. Like that was such a critical, terrible time for him to lose her. And now we're, you know, there's a lot of work that we're trying to do where his body has kept the score of the trauma, but long before he was able to process out some of the stuff, you know?
It really is like PTSD, which I still don't know a ton about, you know, the psychological like science behind PTSD. But what I do know is that there's no reasoning to help you cope with it in the moment. Like when, you know, I was reading this book that was talking about war veterans, that when they're experiencing PTSD, their brain is telling them, you are in the middle of this battle. Right. You are in the middle of this war zone. Yep. You are being attacked right now. Your brain is like processing that faster than or I don't know if it's your brain. Sorry, I'm really showing my cards here that I don't know what I'm talking about totally, but
no, it's true.
It's almost like you can't process fast enough that this isn't real life. You can't process fast enough that this isn't really happening to me. I've got to be in survival mode. I'm, you know, it's just an instinct. It's like in your DNA. True. And so sometimes when we experience these traumatic things, our response to it isn't just like okay, well, you've got a reason. You've got to tell yourself that that's not true. You've got to tell yourself that this isn't real. Like it's not computing fast enough to even be able to do that. And so it's a lot of like like we said, rewiring. It's a lot of therapy. It's a lot of help to rewire our brains to process in a, you know, in a truth-based manner, if that makes sense.
So good. Yeah, absolutely. It does. Mack, man, I'm way past time that I told you. I really appreciate you spending time with me. This has been incredible. I feel like we can go on for another hour and talk about this. Golly, we need to have you back on in a couple of years and we can compare notes on that. Like, because we're in the throes of it too, going, all right, how do we do this with our kids as far as helping them to sort through the trauma they've experienced in the past and everything. And so it'd be really interesting too, to note, where does worship have a role in that? You know, what does that look like in all of us, in healing from trauma, healing from the painful experiences that we've had in life. And so, bro, we'll have you back on. We'll talk about that at some point. That'd be amazing.
This has been so good. I've loved hanging with you, Davey.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Where can we follow you, man? Where can we track what's going on in your life?
You can follow my music. I'm everywhere music is, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all that stuff. And then you can follow me on Instagram. That's primarily where like I post stuff. A lot of it's about my family and what's happening with us. But yeah, we're having a good time.
That's awesome, man. Well, thanks for spending time with us. Been so generous.
All right, brother. We'll see you soon.
Well, Davey, I knew that would be incredible, and it did not fail. So thanks to Mack Brock. And I love the moment where you get to tell them what the song means. Like I mean, you know, you think about that, anyone who is creating and putting something out into the world and to see what God might do through it, like that's pretty awesome. So that was really, I'm sure that built his faith and encouraged him and our community and our listeners and me as well. So another awesome conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mack. And thank you guys for tuning in today. And we've got more in this series.
Love it.
You're definitely not going to want to miss the last one we have in this series. It's going to be, we have a very special guest coming in on the last one. So, but if you have not ordered your copy of Nothing Is Wasted, you can order it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the places, nothingiswastedbook.com. You can find out more information about it. We'd love for you to order your copy of that and then let us know how how is it impacting you? Please let us know. Let us
that
know
would
on
be
Instagram.
amazing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just tag us on Instagram at Nothing Is Wasted Ministries. Tag me at Davey Blackburn at Samp for Aubrey, and we would love to just hear how this is impacting you.
Yeah, we absolutely
in your own story,
would.
whether you're on a mountaintop or you're in a valley right now.
Yeah,
we would love to hear what this is doing for you. We also want to thank Sleeping at Last for providing all the music for the Nothing Is Wasted podcast. You can download or stream his music anywhere music can be downloaded and streamed. Next week, we have another great episode in this book launch series. So go ahead and take a listen to this little clip from that conversation.
And so really, when I think about how to help our kids in healing, it's being a steady person who brings them to the feet of Jesus. So when we went to one of our practitioners, she asked me, Christy, what's your end goal? What's your end goal with Weston? We were doing cranial sacral with Weston. She said, what's your end goal with him? And she's a believer. And I just started tearing up. And I just said, I don't want him to be a victim of his circumstances. Yeah. I want him to be a thriving, healthy adult that didn't have this horrible situation happen to him to affect the rest of his life. And that's like a fear-led answer.
Yeah.
Because I think the issue is, I had a foster brother growing up, and he had a very similar circumstance where his mom was taken through murder. And I watched his response in life, and he was older than me, and I was confused why, some of the things that he did, it was making no sense to me. Like, why is this grown boy acting like this? And again, he didn't have the same tools that I had. He didn't have two parents. He didn't have all that. And he was foster. He was abandoned, all that. And so when I think about his life, he ended up in juvenile later on. And so my response is, if I don't want my son to take the same path, I don't want, because he had the same, I was being fear-led in my response. And so what she said to me, she goes, and with tears in her eyes, his therapist said, our response to our kid, our end goal for our kid is no matter what, in whatever circumstance, whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether they're acting out, whether they're not, is to lead them to the feet of Jesus.
Wow.